I was 14 years old when I first became aware of the strange neighbor living next to us. Our house was in a small, quiet town, nestled at the end of a cul-de-sac. All the neighbors were friendly, except for the house next door. That was where Mr. Miller lived. He was an older man, probably in his late 50s, with a constantly angry face and a habit of rarely speaking to anyone. His house always gave me a creepy feeling, with its unkempt garden and trash scattered all over it. One day, while playing in my backyard, I noticed Mr. Miller standing at his window, watching me. I felt weirded out and quickly went inside. That night, I told my parents about it, but they brushed it off, saying he was just an old man with nothing better to do. A few weeks later, I was walking home from school and saw Mr. Miller in his front yard. He was staring at something in his hand, mumbling to himself. As I passed by, he looked up and gave me a small, eerie smile. I hurried home, feeling his eyes on my back. That evening, I heard noises outside my bedroom window. It sounded like someone was in our backyard. My heart raced as I peeked through the blinds. In the dim light, I could make out a figure moving near the fence that separated our properties. I couldn't tell who it was, but I got really scared. The next morning, I told my parents about the figure in the backyard. My dad went out to check, but he found nothing. He said it was probably just a raccoon or some other animal. I wanted to believe him, but something inside me knew it was more sinister. A few nights later, I was home alone. My parents had gone out for a dinner date. I was in the living room watching TV when there was a knock at the front door. Cautiously, I approached the door and asked who it was. A familiar, gravelly voice responded,
"It's your neighbor, Mr. Miller. I need to talk to you."
My heart sank. I remembered my parents' warnings not to open the door to strangers. I called out, telling him my parents weren't home and that he should come back another time. There was a long pause, and then he said in a low tone,
"It's important, dear. Please, open the door."
Fear gripped me, and I backed away from the door, not responding. I heard him sigh, and then the sound of his footsteps as he walked away. I spent the rest of the evening huddled on the couch, too afraid to move. The following day, I told my parents about Mr. Miller's visit. My dad was concerned and decided to talk to Mr. Miller. He came back with a troubled look on his face. Mr. Miller had denied coming to our house the previous night. He claimed he had been in bed early with a cold. Things seemed to settle down after that. Mr. Miller kept to himself, and I tried to forget the incidents. But one evening, while my parents were again out, I heard the unmistakable sound of someone trying to open the back door. I froze, then mustered the courage to look out the window. There he was, Mr. Miller, trying to pry open our door with a crowbar. His face was twisted in concentration, oblivious to me watching him. I screamed, and he looked up, our eyes locking. The look on his face was a mix of shock and anger. I called 911 as Mr. Miller fled. The police arrived quickly and searched the area, but he was gone. They told us he had been wanted for questioning in several break-ins around our neighborhood. Mr. Miller never returned to his house. It was later discovered that he had been living under a false identity with a troubling past. Our quiet neighborhood was shaken, but relieved that he was gone. I often think back to those days, grateful that nothing worse happened. I moved into a small, quiet neighborhood last summer. The houses were spaced out, each with its own little yard and a few trees. My nearest neighbor's house was just visible through the shrubs that divided our properties. I didn't know much about my neighbors, but there was one who caught my attention. His house was always dark, with curtains drawn, and I rarely saw him outside. When I did, he seemed to be always staring at my house, which was kinda weird. One evening, while I was in my living room watching Netflix, I noticed movement outside my window. I paused the movie and peered through the blinds. It was my neighbor, standing at the edge of his yard, just staring at my house. I quickly closed the blinds, feeling a bit spooked. A few days later, I came home from work to find a small brown package on my doorstep. It was odd because I hadn't ordered anything. The package had no return address, just my name scribbled on it. Inside was a simple hand-carved wooden figurine. It was crudely made and kind of creepy, with disproportionate limbs and a frowning face. I didn't know what to make of it but decided to keep it on my shelf, thinking maybe it was just a strange gesture from a neighbor. Things got weirder when I started noticing things around my house being slightly off. A picture frame that was always straight would be crooked, or my kitchen chairs would be pulled out from the table. It was subtle, but enough to make me feel like someone had been inside my home. Then one night, I was jolted awake by a sound downstairs. It was a soft, scraping noise, like something being dragged across the floor. I lay in bed, frozen with fear, listening. The noise stopped, and there was silence. Gathering courage, I got out of bed and tiptoed to my bedroom door. I opened it slowly, the hinges creaking slightly. The house was dark, the only light coming from the moon shining through the windows. I made my way downstairs, my heart pounding in my chest. As I reached the bottom, I saw the back door slightly opened. I was sure I had locked it before going to bed. I quickly closed it and checked the rest of the house. Nothing else seemed out of place, but I had a bad feeling in my stomach. The next morning, I decided to install a security camera. I needed to know if someone was really coming into my house. I set it up to cover the main areas of the house and the front and back doors. 2 nights later, the camera captured something. I woke up to an alert on my phone. There was a motion detected in the living room. Hard in my throat, I opened the app to view the live feed. There, in the dimly lit room, was my neighbor. He was just standing there, looking around, his movements slow and deliberate. After a few moments, he walked toward the camera and looked directly into it. His face was expressionless, but his eyes seemed extremely creepy. He stared at the camera for a few moments, then he turned around and left. I called the police immediately. They arrived and searched the area but found no sign of my neighbor. The back door showed signs of tampering, and they believed he had picked the lock. The police went to his house, but it was empty. It looked like he had left in a hurry, leaving most of his belongings behind. Since then, I haven't seen my neighbor again. The house next door remains vacant, a constant reminder of the chilling events. I was 13 years old when a frightening incident occurred at my friend Mia's house. At the time, we were both in middle school, and Mia lived in a neighborhood that wasn't exactly the safest. Her mom, raising Mia on her own, often worked late nights, leaving us alone in the house. She would compensate by stocking the house with lots of snacks and allowing us unlimited access to movies. One evening, while it was still light outside, Mia and I decided to take a walk to a nearby park and pond, just a few blocks from her house. On our way back, when we were close to Mia's home, a car slowly approached us from behind. Mia recognized the driver. It was her neighbor Tom, who lived next door. Tom was an older man, probably in his mid-60s, with a noticeable gray beard and a bald head. Tom rolled down his window and asked us about our plans for the night. Mia, being her usual friendly self, told him we were having a sleepover and planned to watch horror movies and maybe make some prank calls. I was a bit uncomfortable with how much she shared with him, but I assumed she knew him well enough. Tom chuckled at our plans and then mentioned noticing Mia's mom's car wasn't in the driveway, deducing she must be working late again. Mia confirmed this, and Tom drove off after wishing us fun for our sleepover, but not without giving a peculiar smile that made me feel a bit worried. Once inside Mia's house, I expressed my concerns about Tom to Mia. She admitted that he was a bit odd, but didn't think he was dangerous. We spent the evening making pizza, enjoying our snacks, and watching movies. Mia was more carefree by nature, while I tended to be more cautious. It was around midnight, maybe later, and Mia's mom still hadn't returned home. We were settling down in the living room, sleeping bags laid out, with a scary movie playing in the background, when Mia suddenly muted the TV. She whispered that she thought she saw the motion sensor light in the backyard flicker on and off. We both got up to check the window that overlooked the backyard, but we didn't see anything initially. However, the light flicked on again a short while later, so we decided to investigate from a basement window, which offered a better view of the yard. We crept down to the basement in the dark, trying not to make any noise or turn on any lights in case someone was outside. It was unusual to see Mia acting so serious. Usually she was the more relaxed one. Maybe the scary movies were making us both jumpy. In the basement, there was a large window next to a door leading to the backyard. As the motion sensor light turned on again, we could see a bit more of the basement. Suddenly, we heard a noise at the door. Someone was trying to open it. We screamed, both scared and shocked. The window had blinds, so we couldn't see who was trying to get in, but we knew someone was there. Mia moved towards the door. I whispered to her that we should call her mom or the police. Mia cautiously lifted a corner of the blinds to see who it was. It was Tom, trying to open the door. We both screamed again when we saw him. He put up his hands, saying he didn't mean to scare us, and was just checking to make sure we were safe because he saw the light in the yard. But his expression seemed off, and we didn't believe him. Mia told him to leave, or she'd call the police. Tom insisted he was just concerned for our safety, knowing we were alone. He reached for the door handle again, but I grabbed Mia's arm and told her to call 911. I yelled that we were calling the police, and Tom finally backed away from the door and left. Mia's mom arrived home shortly after, and we quickly explained everything to her. She was surprised but reluctant to call the police, as Tom hadn't actually entered the house. Mia and I were both really scared, though, and insisted something should be done. Thankfully, I didn't encounter Tom again in the few times I visited after that incident. Mia and her mom moved away not long after. I still wonder what Tom's intentions were that night, and I'm just thankful we never had to find out.